Welcome to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, Courageously Expanding Love with me, Elizabeth Cunningham. Has the way that love has arisen in you seemed out of place or even taboo? My mission is to expand the conversation of love in the world. Is it possible to have deep, loving, healthy relationships? Have you ever been curious about having more than one relationship or partner at a time? Get ready to transform in love, be courageous, and set yourself free. In this show, we talk about relationships, sex, love, and the ways we wish we could be, but never thought were possible. I shed light on things that are not always talked about with conversations about expanding love. The Elizabeth Cunningham Show starts now. Elizabeth Cunningham Show. My name is Elizabeth Cunningham, and we are courageously expanding love. And a little quick note before we begin, this show happens every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Pacific time. So make sure that you come and check us out live, or you can catch the replay on YouTube or any place that has podcasts, really. I think it's like almost any place that has podcasts now. So make sure that you hit subscribe, like whatever the button is on the whatever platform that you're using to make sure that you can check out our show. All right, and welcome to our episode. I'm so excited. We have Chad Spangler here today of polyamfam. Yes, the crowd goes wild. Woo! And in this episode, we're going to talk in depth about how toxic masculinity impacts non-monogamy, normalizing difficult conversations, and other criticisms about polyamory. Yay! Hi, Chad.
Amazing. Hello. I'm super excited.
Oh my
It's
God.
been a while since I've done any sort of podcast or anything like that, so I'm excited to do it again.
Well, I'm just overjoyed to have you here. Finally followed up on all of my messages and was like, Chad.
I mean, I'm the worst at following up on messages, so don't worry. My DMs are an absolute nightmare.
It is all, I'm pretty sure I sent you the DM and it was like, it had that like the face emoji that has all of the swirls for the face, where it's just like, like that's how I feel about my DMs, is like, Yep. I don't even know where to start with this.
Right. I've kind of given up on keeping track of them, because if I did that, it would literally be the only thing I did ever. Like, I couldn't do anything else.
It's absolutely true. All right, I'm going to fangirl you for a little bit, and then we're going to go into toxic masculinity. So everyone needs to check out Chad, the polyamfam on Instagram. And I think you have a YouTube channel now, yeah?
I do. I'm looking to get more consistent on that. I have some video ideas, but I've been kind of pedal to the metal on TikTok recently, so I've gotten a little distracted on that. But yeah, I am. I have one real special video cooking up for the next few weeks for my YouTube channel. That's going to be a little spicy. So,
Ooh, I'm excited. No, actually, so I was. I taught, like, I do. I have to fangirl you for a second, because me and my play partner love your videos. We like send them back and forth. Like, he'll send me a message and he'll be like, have you seen polyamfam's new video?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and I told him, I saw him this past Saturday, and I was like, guess who's going to be my guest? And he freaked out, so he's really excited.
Well, hello to the both of you.
Yeah. Okay, but now let's be serious. My fangirl moment is over. What is, let's just jump right in. What is toxic masculinity? And I feel like that's like, when I say the words toxic masculinity, that's like the question that I get, is either people get upset about it first, or they're just like, what do you mean by that? What does that even mean?
That's kind of the reaction I get too when I say toxic masculinity, is people assume that I mean that, all men are terrible and everything about being a man is terrible, but that's not really what it is. It's about those aspects of being a man that are, negatively affect you and the people around you. this things like the aggressive territorialism that a lot of us have been taught, just our entire lives, our attitudes towards women, towards, towards the LGBT community. There's so many aspects that we've all kind of grew up with. Even, conservative areas of the country are, notorious for this, but, there are certain things that happen just everywhere that we grow up and we kind of take for granted the negative things that we learn about what it is to be a man throughout our lives. And that's what toxic masculinity is. It's not that you should just be ashamed for being a man, be ashamed for your gender, although sometimes we are pretty terrible.
I think about like people though,
yes.
Like regardless of your gender, like you can be a shithead, like
yes, it's true. Yeah. And toxic masculinity, in my opinion, is there's so much. When we talk about toxic monogamy, just kind of the aspects of like how you own your partner, how like you are everything to each other, like, stuff that, should really be examined. I feel like when you peel back the curtain on that a little bit, like 80% of toxic monogamy can kind of be traced back to toxic masculinity, which in my opinion is harder to deal with, because like monogamy, to me at least, and to a lot of other people, is like a thing you do, whereas masculinity is a thing you are. So that's like a much harder thing to tackle for a lot of men.
Yeah, well, I think that, masculinity is, and inside of this conversation of toxic masculinity, where it is really performative, like it's something that you've learned, it's something that you now act upon, and that there's a difference between toxic masculinity and just masculinity, right? And because there's like you can, there's the masculine and the feminine, which doesn't necessarily have to do with gender, right? But there's like you can be masculine and you can be more feminine. And I think when we start talking about toxic masculinity, it's those traits that we, mostly, men, like boys and men have learned, where it's like you're supposed to be this way, you're supposed to act in a certain way, you're supposed to be territorial, like you're not a real man if you do X, Y, and Z. And so then that's why it becomes toxic, is because it becomes this like have to, or performative, or like almost forced sort of thing that you have to be.
Right. Exactly. Nail on the head. It's you're almost like putting on a show, and you're taught, at least I can only speak for myself, but I was taught this, there they go. Hello,
doggos.
But I was, taught these things so aggressively that the act kind of becomes who you are at a certain point. You kind of forget you're acting, and it just becomes your behavior, and it becomes very problematic in a lot of ways,
Yeah. So why is this, how is it problematic, and why is it important to talk about? I mean, I think maybe the why it's problematic might be inherent in what we just said, but, so maybe it's why is it important to talk about?
I think it's important to talk about because we can do better, right? We can kind of rethink what masculinity means to us, and kind of dissect those toxic parts of it and try to move in a better direction. And I think that's really important, not just for us, but for future generations, because a lot of this stuff has been learned generationally, is passed down. Well, my dad was this way, so I'm this way, and certain things. So I think it's very important to break that cycle and kind of redefine what masculinity means in a way that is a lot more positive moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you, I mean, I have so many questions about this, but I think, what would be more positive? Like I'm trying to put these two questions together, is like, how would it be more positive? And also, how does it impact polyamory? So there's kind of like this, it's those moving parts where it's like, how does toxic masculinity impact polyamory? And then also like, in having it be better, then how would that impact be? So I guess it's more of like a three-step question.
Yeah.
So.
As far as how it impacts polyamory. Where do I start? Because we all kind of, even dating in general, not even necessarily polyamory, but just dating in general, you know, there are stereotypes of just, you know, a woman goes to like try to like online date, for instance, and the response is just a torrent of terrible men trying to flood their DMs and such. And that very much spills over into polyamory because, you know, a big part of masculinity is like, if a woman is not exclusive to a man, then, oh, that woman is, you know, in a not good way, easy, and like an easy target to like prey upon, like dating wise. And men kind of take that and run with it. And again, like I am being like very gendered here and kind of speaking in stereotypes, I admit, but you know, there's a reason they exist, right? It's because it's so common. And I know personally from myself and from men I've talked to that we go into non-monogamy, you know, thinking it's going to be not necessarily the easiest thing in the world, but, oh, this is going to be great. And then all of a sudden, these things we were taught our entire lives about what it means to be a man and like have, you know, ownership over someone else, smack us right in the face and make everything so much harder when we, you know, especially for people transitioning from monogamy to polyamory.
Oh yeah, no, I think the transition from monogamy to polyamory is such a huge learning and growth experience. And it's that oh shoot, I'm gonna forget the name of it, but there's like the thought where it's like when you're new at something that you're like super confident about it because you don't know anything about it.
Dunning-Kruger effect, is that it?
Yes, that's what it, yes. Thank you.
No problem.
But yeah, when you're new at something that you're like, oh, I'm going to be like, this is going to be so easy and I'm really good at this. And you have all of these like fantasies basically about it. And then all of a sudden you start to actually do it and you're like, all of the shit just comes up where you're like,
yes,
actually, I suck at this.
Yes.
And it's like kind of that plummet of confidence, but also that's the learning curve where then you see where are you falling short. And I do think that especially men coming from a culture of toxic masculinity going into polyamory and creating these relationships, that's absolutely like a thing that you have to be confronted by.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And toxic masculinity can affect like how you even, you know, go about these relationships. A lot of people come into polyamory for very wrong reasons because of toxic masculinity, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to take a break. And when we come back from the break, I want to dive a little bit deeper into what does this actually look like? Like, what are these difficult conversations that you have to have in order to, you know, see the negative impacts of toxic masculinity and also to then translate it and go into healthy relationships. Like there's like a whole journey there. Yeah. So we're going to talk about that when we come back from the break, and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, Courageously Expanding Love. And we are here with Chad Spangler, and we're talking about toxic masculinity and how that intersects with polyamory. And in the last segment, we talked about what is toxic masculinity and, you know, why is it important for us to be talking about that? And what are some of the impacts that it has on men in particular? And now we're moving into, you know, what is the impact that, yeah, it has on men? And now, how does that impact men who are transitioning from monogamy to polyamory? You know, what do you have to confront? Like, what are the difficult conversations that you have to have?
Yeah, the absolute biggest, I can think of one giant elephant in the room that is caused, in my opinion, almost entirely by toxic masculinity, and that is the one penis policy. We, you know, as men are taught that, as monogamous men are taught that if, you know, your woman is, and again, this is a very cis hetero sort of like caricature, is, you know, even interested in another person, you're like failing as a man, right? So many people, men, go into a non-monogamy with this idea of like, okay, well, I'm okay with my woman partner dating, seeing, doing whatever with other women, but not other men. Because we've been taught to be so territorial, right? And that's a big difficulty with men, even men who don't want that. Myself, I'm including myself in here. I never wanted that from the onset. I just, that never felt right to me. But at the same time, it was still very hard to overcome the issues that come with that, because, whether I liked it or not, I was more comfortable with my, partners with other women and not men. I didn't like that. Like, I could see kind of where I wanted to be, but it was like, I couldn't force myself to be there. Right.
Yeah.
Because of all of these things that I had just been taught my entire life, especially coming from like a small rural town. And it just makes everything hard. It makes, equality in non-monogamy so much more difficult to just accept and get into. It's always an ongoing process. It doesn't just go away,
You're not totally transformed. You're not a completely enlightened human being.
Not quite. As much as I try, I think trying to be that is more important than actually being that, because I think that goal is kind of impossible.
Yeah, well, it's kind of the idea that you have a commitment to growth. And what is growth but an ongoing process, a horizon that you can never reach, right? It's just always out there in front of you, but it does have you strive to be better. And I think that what you said was really brilliant, where it's like you saw where you wanted to be. But I think the other really key important thing that you just said was that you were able to admit where you are now. It's like, I see that this is like the quote unquote better option is to like be okay with this. And like, these are all of the feelings that are coming up for me. And in my experience, because when I first started practicing polyamory, I hadn't come out as queer yet. So basically I was just dating men. And that was the thing that I experienced personally, and that now I see professionally, is that it's hard. It's hard to admit that there's a shortcoming there. And I almost even in my heart feel bad saying shortcoming, because it really, and to be fair, it's not even necessarily a shortcoming. It's just, you were conditioned in a certain way. And now, because you were conditioned in a certain way, you have these feelings, and now you have to deal with these feelings trying to be a new way.
Right. And that's another piece of toxic masculinity that hurts the whole process, is that men are often taught to bury their feelings, to not express how they feel, to, keep that shit inside, right? Deal with it. You got to just man up and, stuff like that. So that's a whole nother element of toxic masculinity that makes, it's kind of a vicious cycle in a way. Elements, these negative elements of toxic masculinity make the other parts of toxic masculinity that much harder to overcome. There's just it's so ingrained,
Right. It's a system that has very well protected itself.
Yes. Yeah. And it's very hard. It's extremely hard for a lot of men. And I've, talked to men who have had those same issues of just, I'm not, I want to be comfortable with other men. Like, I know it's not fair, or, I know my partner wants that, doesn't want to be limited in the genders they can, date, but I just can't, I can't get there, I can't, I'm just something about other men, just triggers all of these emotions in me, and it makes me feel like I'm failing. It makes me feel like I'm just bad, that, I'm not worthy or something like that,
Yeah, no, thank you for really spelling it all out like that, because that's what men are dealing with. That's also what I see as well. And one of the things that I share with my clients is that there's a difference between your rational logic and your emotional logic.
Oh yeah.
And so we can beat ourselves up all day long about the rational logic of something, when really what we need to deal with is actually the emotional logic. But like you said, there's kind of that trap of the toxic masculinity where it's well, you can't feel your emotions.
Right.
And I've even had, men who've come to me where I'm well, how do you feel about that? And they'll say well, what I think this, da, 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 or like, well, this happened, and it, you know, they'll talk about the action of something or the thoughts of something, but like don't even have the language because
Right.
you haven't been taught that, and you haven't, in like, knowing and feeling your emotions is actually a practice.
Yes, and I'm so glad you said that, because
Yeah.
I've had to actively kind of practice this whole, even in my conversations. I will have a conversation with a partner and I will say, okay, logically, I know this is what is going on, but this is how I feel about it. And they do not coincide right now. And it's causing this weird tornado in my brain that like I just can't deal. Like, I know what I'm feeling isn't necessarily like the logical, but it is important to take that step and to, rationally, think about things in that like logic brain, but also to just dig into, okay, why does my emotional side like feel this way? And it is a practice. You have to make a routine of it. It doesn't just happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what are some of the other difficult conversations that you see or hear, coming up around this? We talked about one penis policy, like what else comes up?
A lot of kind of ownership oriented stuff, right? Like even beyond one penis policies, like invasive sort of like needing to know details that you're not necessarily entitled to because it's not your relationship, but because you've been taught like I have to have control over all of this, that I need to know every single detail of these things, right? And that's really hard to let go of. I mean, obviously communication is important. However, you're not necessarily entitled to every little tiny bit of information about other people's relationships. They're not yours, right? But I've seen that cause problems with myself and other men. And yeah, it's there's just so much that's hard to deal with because of what we've been taught, like you said, bury your emotions,
Yeah, well, I mean, I grew up in a very masculine environment. I grew up in the Midwest, and I was, the only girl in my neighborhood, and like grew up with the guys and like all this stuff. And it really wasn't until I was like 29 where I really was like, okay, I started dating who is now my current nesting partner. And they were like, you never tell me how you feel. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to and we created a game. We were like, okay, once a day for this whole week, I am going to say how I feel about something. And I realized that my feelings vocabulary was that of a 5-year-old, because that was the last time that I had expressed my feelings openly. And I was like, so I could say things like, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm upset. And then my partner would be like, well, what does upset mean? And I'm like, I don't know, upset. Like,
right.
And so like not even having like the full vocabulary. So it really does, when you start to take on this practice, that, it takes baby steps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know like this may be surprising to a lot of people, but Thanks, Holly. It may be surprising to a lot of people, but my social media followings, my demographics are overwhelmingly women. It's not men. And every time I make some kind of video, some kind of post about toxic masculinity, or there's this, even I have like a stereotype, like a caricature of a toxic masculinity, like person, a man, and the women, both the men and the women, but especially the women who date men, relate to that so hard. I even say in my descriptions, I'm like, I know this is like kind of an exaggeration, and people go, no, it really isn't.
But it's not though. It's not. It's so not though.
Yeah.
It's like, and in my experience, it's average.
Yeah.
Like in my experience, your caricature is like, yeah, like that. I know that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know that guy. That's why I can be that guy, is because like I've seen it, right? Like I've seen it online. Sometimes I see it in person. It's just so overwhelming, like just everywhere. right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of why it's hard to, because then you have, even when you're working on yourself, even when you're trying to, overcome these like jealousy issues that are caused by toxic masculinity or just your feelings in general, you have this entire, like basically the entire culture is kind of working against you, because they're like, no, you're not supposed to feel that way. You were right before. Don't work on yourself. You're not making it better. This is the way it's supposed to be. So that just makes it that much harder and that much more isolating too.
Yeah, definitely. And what I want to, and we're gonna go on a break here really quick, but what I want to talk about as well, because I really do think that it is really isolating. And like you said, it's like it's this system that kind of protects itself.
Yes.
And so, you have the people who are kind of outside of it, like the women who are, dating the men who are a part of that, right? Where they really see that because they're the ones who are being impacted by it in such a huge way.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so when we come back, I want to talk about, what is normalizing this conversation even look like? And I know that that's a huge question to tackle, but I really want to know, like, let's talk about that. What does normalizing this conversation look like? What is it going to take? And then how will that impact polyamory? And we'll kind of get a little bit more into that. So all of that after the break. So we'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, Courageously Expanding in Love. And we are talking to Chad Spangler about toxic masculinity, about normalizing difficult conversations, just like the one that we're having, and how all of that impacts polyamory and building healthy, like, how do you go from toxic masculinity to build a healthy polyamorous relationship? And we're going to tackle it all right now. In the next 15 minutes, we're going to solve all the problems.
Yep, that's the plan.
All right. Perfect.
We got this.
I'm glad you're on board with me here.
No problem.
And go. All right.
All right.
But really, how, like, we've talked about in the show, what is toxic masculinity? How does that impact, men and people? And also, how does that impact relationships? And kind of where we left off was, okay, now we have this kind of divide. Like, we have this system of toxic masculinity that protects itself. It's like, this is the way that you should be. This is how you're supposed to be. If you go outside of this system, then, you're a pussy or whatever, and so it really does, it protects itself. And as you said, you make a lot of videos about, what people are dealing with and how they're struggling. And most of your audience is women.
Yeah.
Right.
And yeah, I think that's an important part of kind of trying to tackle toxic masculinity, is just listening to women, because they, I would say, are affected by it the most, right? Most men, especially cis men, are, don't fully have to, deal with the direct ramifications of toxic masculinity. They don't have to deal with like all these creeps in their DMs, all this treatment they get, all the mansplaining, all of that stuff. So like I think one of the biggest things you can do on an individual basis to try and just be better and unlearn toxic masculinity is simply listen to women, right? Because their experiences will tell you more than you thought you could know about toxic masculinity, more than you want to know, honestly, because I hear some of these things and I'm just like, Jesus Christ. It makes it sometimes, because sometimes make the joke that I think I could be bisexual, but I look at my own gender and go, no, pass. I'm good.
Well, it's also like the bisexual joke of, more femme people, that it's just like, oh man, like, I kind of wish that I was only into women,
right. If bisexuality was a choice, why would I choose men? I've seen that one, and here.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. But no, I think that that's a really important, all jokes aside, but I think that that's a really important thing is, getting feedback of the people who are most impacted by your behavior.
Yeah.
You know, what is it like being with you? What is it like being around you? How does your behavior and actions impact, the people who are in your life, who you're dealing with on a regular basis?
And I know we see jokes like we just exchanged or whatever about just like, screw men, they're the worst or whatever. And men will get offended because they feel like targeted, right? But there's instead of just like having that like knee-jerk defensive reaction, ask yourself why these jokes are so prevalent. And there's a reason. It's because like so much of this behavior is so common that people are just fed up with it. They're sick of the shit, It's like, so they make these jokes, myself included. I make jokes about men all the time, as a man.
That's why I think your videos are hilarious. Like,
I think that's what resonates with so many people. Like, I think they see these criticisms, and I try to dig, a little deeper than just damn dogs. See that they're consistent.
They are consistent.
They will bark once every segment, I swear. But like, I think that's why it resonates so much with people, is because I at least try to dig like a little deeper and give a little bit of commentary on like, the joke of like, oh, this is why people hate men or whatever, I try to like dig like a little deeper in there. And I think that helps people just get it a little more,
Well, I've talked with my my nesting partner also dates men as well, and so sometimes we, when we talk about this, we have this conversation, and I feel like I'm having this conversation all the time, constantly, but it's, what's the line? Because you there's like calling people out for behavior, but then there's also the concept of like calling people in.
Yes,
and like,
absolutely.
That's kind of the line that I see here, is like, because there's only so much calling out that we can do before there's a division, right? There's like even more of a division than there already is. And and we're just kind of, and now we're adding to the system where people are like, well, yeah, I want to stay in the toxic masculinity system because everything outside of that is just like hating men. So exactly. I'll just stay in here because at least these people don't hate me.
Yeah. And I think I try to take a balanced approach, because some behavior, in my opinion, is just so egregious that there really is no other appropriate response besides fuck this, and just like hating on her or whatever. But like, there's so much middle ground too. Yeah. And I think something that's helped me is trying my best when I'm, either making a video or just having a conversation, to try and focus on criticizing the actual behavior and not necessarily always the person. Because sometimes the person is just, I was there. I used to be that person that had this like extremely toxic, problematic belief, but like, they're willing to listen, and they're not just, coming out just swinging, being just a total asshole. Like you can talk to this person. And I think a lot of the time focusing on the behavior, it is sometimes more beneficial, because it doesn't make men feel personally attacked, right? And they're just like, okay, I can see why that's shitty. Instead of calling them shitty, which just like gets this defensive, just like, no, like I'm fine. Like you're just like, you're sensitive. You're a little snowflake. Like calling out. I feel like criticizing the behavior is a way people be like, all right, we can talk about this separate thing that's not like my identity, right?
Right. No, I think that's an amazing point. And, bringing that into the willingness to listen as well.
Yes.
And I think inside of the willingness to listen is also just recognizing that you have an impact. Like step one, recognize that the things that you do and the words that come out of your mouth have an impact, regardless of who you are, like, regardless of your gender. But specifically, in talking about toxic masculinity, it's just like, just recognizing that, and then being willing to get curious about how it's impacting specifically the people in your life. Because I think also with concepts like this, we can separate ourselves. We're like, well, I'm not fully like that, or I'm not totally, or like, I'm not as bad as like these people, and so you can, use it to separate yourself.
Right.
And so I also think, just getting curious about how does that impact you? Okay, it only impacts you in a small way. Fine. How?
Yeah.
Go find out.
I think I've experienced this notion that people just think like, well, if it happens on the internet, it's somehow not real, right? So that allows this like horrible, like kind of trolly, like, anonymity is just a crazy drug. But like, it's easy for people to think in that kind of noisy world that they really don't have an impact, but you don't have to change the entire world to like make it slightly better. It's incremental change, right? Your behavior day to day cumulatively will affect other people. And like, everybody doing this together with like trying to tackle these issues will make a difference, even though you might feel like working on yourself doesn't do anything, right? It does. Like it's not, no, it might not be a world-changing thing, but it doesn't have to be. The change doesn't happen overnight,
It does not. Well, and then, okay, so let's say all of this happened. Let's say, people, men start to listen, start to get curious, start to really see the impact of their behavior on, just even like the 5 people around you, right? Like it doesn't have to be the impact of everything on your life, but it's like, who are the top 5 people that you interact with on a regular basis? And how are you impacting them? So let's say that they did that. How would that impact polyamory? Like, again, we're talking about like going from monogamy to polyamory. So then how would that impact like that transition, or like even creating healthy relationships?
I mean, I think if that were a thing that happened in mass, that we worked on this, I think men would have a lot easier time transition, because like part of one of the biggest issues men have, from my experience of going from monogamy to polyamory, is simply they start to date and there's no interest. And sometimes they get bitter at women, or like, but they don't realize that like other men have caused this. Like there's always a defense up because of horrible experiences that women have had. So I think things would get a lot easier for men, because men in general would just be more trusted by everyone. If we like, and that's, I think it would do wonders for polyamory, because like that is one of the biggest things that people talk to me about, is just like, I'm getting like, specifically, this is again very, I hate how cis hetero my like stuff gets sometimes, but I speak from experience. So, but one of the biggest things is just like, oh, we opened up and my wife is getting an overwhelming amount of attention and I'm getting none, and this sucks and I hate it. And I'm like, well, maybe if we all worked on just being more trustworthy as masculine people, then that wouldn't be such an issue, that we can more easily connect with people without having to, kind of show our card at the door being like, I'm not one of the shitty ones, I promise.
Yeah, and it does. And I think that is that is the mic drop moment for the show for me, is that, yeah, if, and again, we're not talking about world changing things. Well, we are talking about world changing things, but we're talking about like small actions.
Yeah.
Where it's just like small actions of getting curious, how do you impact the people around you? And if you do that, it's like, oh my God, you can have this amazing love life, and we can actually start to impact it does. There's a ripple effect. There's a ripple effect to that. And it's
absolutely.
like, yeah. And, creating, and, trust takes a minute to rebuild. And I think that if we started on this journey, that there would be an opportunity to rebuild trust. I might be like the optimist here, but I really do believe that I never think that hope is lost,
Oh yeah.
Like I absolutely believe that we can turn the ship around.
Absolutely. It's hard to feel that way sometimes in the age of the internet, where there's just so much negativity, but good exists in the world as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, and it's something that we can actually have an impact on. And I think I'm going to skip this last break because I want to, I love where we're at right now.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I also want to go into, what do you, and I also want to have time for you to like share what you're up to too. One of the things we're gonna do is like, what's Chad up to? How can more people get involved in what Chad's up to? And we have an awesome giveaway too, which I'm so excited about. Okay.
Yes.
I've been seeing the pictures online and I'm like, I'm excited about this giveaway. Okay. But yeah, like being in this conversation of literally like that there can be these small steps, these small incremental steps to have it be easier for everyone, not just you, and it will be easier for you. For those of you who are in it for yourself, hey, this will make it easier for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Even the selfish intentions benefit from improving toxic masculinity and making it something better, And the thing about that system that protects itself is once you start, especially on a personal level, once you start dismantling like one thing about that system and like realizing, oh, that's not exactly what I thought it was, the other parts of that become like a little more questionable. And it's like, it gets easier as time goes on to like recognize these things and improve,
Yeah, beautiful. Well, what is, it really is, it's beautiful. And I've had to unpack my own, like I shared earlier, my own impact of toxic masculinity and how I was, expressing that, how I was performing toxic masculinity, like as a woman. And I've totally been, I've totally had the moment of like being sexist too. Like women can also be sexist. Some people might disagree with me on that, but
it's conditioning that affects everyone, we're all raised in this society, right? And it's not even those issues that are primarily like about men don't just affect them, right? Don't just teach them. We teach everyone this.
Right. Absolutely. And as you said, like this conversation has been very like cisgendered, heteronormative, but we could have a whole other conversation about how toxic masculinity impacts people in the LGBTQ community and queer relationships and how that shows up. I mean, it literally is, it's pervasive, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like,
and I know that one of the big things, circling back for a second to like the one penis policy, one of the big things there, the defenses is just like, oh, well, it's these other people can provide something that I can't. I have my genitalia and these people, these other people. And I'm like, but why is this like, you're treating that like the end all be all. And people kind of use being queer friendly as kind of a mask to hide behind, because they're just like, well, I'm letting my partner explore their identity, right? And I'm like, yeah, but like, you're only the parts of the identity that you approve of. Like, so they hide behind this, like, well, my wife's bi and I'm not a woman, so whatever. And I'm just like, yeah, but she's bi, she's not a lesbian. Like, she's just like, she's into both, and you're limiting like one. Like, it's strange, right? Like it's strange how even fairly progressive circles can have these issues of just like almost using progressivism to like as a shield to like not have to necessarily dig deeper.
Oh my gosh, that's a whole nother episode right there.
No joke.
It's like, see, I'm not super shitty, I'm only semi shitty.
Exactly.
Don't look at the man behind the curtain. Oh my God. No, absolutely. And okay, so as we kind of come to conclusion in our episode here, I want to know, what do you hope that people take away from this episode?
I specifically for the men, if you're transitioning from monogamy to polyamory and you're having a much rougher time than you expected because of like, jealousy issues and other things caused by, toxic masculinity, how you were taught to be a man, just know you're not alone. Like, almost like everyone deals, it is such a common issue that feels isolating, like you're the only one going through it, but you're not, and we can improve in small ways, to be better. Like, and I guess for non-men, just Honestly, I don't know, because non-men are doing a pretty good job, in my opinion, of like helping with the problem, because they're doing the things like, because you don't, I hear men give the thing of just like, oh well, just like be be welcoming of this change, and like be nice to men who are being shitty. And I'm like, I don't think that's a good I think there is a time and a place to be kind of mean about it, like when it's an extreme thing. But yeah, just like, you're not alone. And if you're like, and obviously I think this is way more common knowledge, I don't think I'm enlightening anyone with this, but women affected by toxic masculinity and like the results of that, you're also not alone. But I think you all know that. that one's more known. Like the common experience there is not a secret.
Yeah, that definitely is a lot more well known. And I think that is honestly like why people, in the LGBTQ community have an easier time dismantling that toxic masculinity, is because we are the ones who are more affected by it. Or affected by it in a way where we can see it, rather. Yes. That's actually a more accurate depiction of that. We're affected by it in a way that we can see it, but it's like when you're in the middle of the issue, it's harder to see, it's harder to see when you are the center.
Yes, absolutely.
So I absolutely do have compassion, for men who are in the middle of dismantling this, and who are, starting to recognize this in themselves. I absolutely do have compassion for that, because it can feel like the smack in the face,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's so many things you just don't expect, and then it just, smacks you.
Yep. All right. What is one action people could take away from this episode?
I'll give you a general one and a specific one. In general, like if you're on social media, which, pretty much everyone is these days, I go follow, non-men polyamory creators. I have gotten so much just information, and, it's been so much easier for me to work through my issues when I've just literally surrounded myself in the perspective of people who are affected by my actions and by the actions of my gender, right? So just there are tons, I would say most polyamory creators, at least that I know and that I follow, are women. There's so many great resources. And I would highly recommend, and I will say I'm a little biased, the podcast Molding Masculinity. I'm a little biased because I've been on it. It's made by my friend who I've known for like 10 years, and I did the art for them. So it's like I'm biased, but it's a great show that like tackles these issues and like dismantles, like, episode by episode of like, let's talk about male anger. Let's talk about how toxic masculinity affects fatherhood, stuff like that. And it's Molding Masculinity is an absolutely fantastic resource to kind of at least start the conversation within yourself of tackling, how do you even start? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So beautiful. Thank you. Those are great actions. I love those actions. It's awesome. Hey. All right. Our giveaway.
Yes.
Do you want to share? Do you want me to share? I have it written down.
Go for it. All
right, cool. So one lucky human will receive a hoodie, a shirt, and a make your own 4-pack of stickers, which they're so good. Oh my God, I love them so much. Okay. They can, again, my fangirl is going to come out here in a sec. So they can choose any design from Chad's website, and the winner will get a promo code at checkout, or get their choices and put the order in manually.
Yes. I'm not sure how logistically you want to get me that. I can send you a code. I can, whatever we need to do, just let me know.
Yeah, totally. So Jacob, our producer, is going to, can you put out the number, Jacob?
Yep, got that on the screen for you.
Okay, the number's on the screen. Yay. Okay, I can't see the screen, so I don't know that. Jacob is on it. He's amazing. All right, the number is 1-800-930-2819. 1-800-930-2819, and call in, and then we will be able to get you connected to Chad, and then he'll be able to get you the promo code.
Yeah, Absolutely.
Sweet. Perfect. That's exactly how that's going to work. Okay. And, and what you're promoting is your shop.
Yes, I am recently a bit of a weird story. Last year, I kind of quit my job for mostly mental health reasons at the time where I was not prepared to do so. But also I was kind of having a little bit of an existential crisis about, I don't even want to do this shit anymore. So it was a real whirlwind. But so now I have gotten to the point where I am, a full-time independent artist, and like my designs, like, man, I don't think I've ever said that like publicly before. Like I've said that where, wow. Say it again. So when you contribute, when you buy something from my shop, you're not just like, oh, this is like a side thing. No, this is my thing. Like, this is how I am an artist, and my polyamfam shop is like the vast majority of like what supports me. So also I just recently got pins, enamel pins, hard enamel pins, and they sold out in like 3 days. Like I have a few of one of them left, but the other one's completely sold out. And I have an email link if you really want one of those, and I will let those people on that email list know first before anybody else gets to know that they're, because I reordered 700 of the things. So,
wow, amazing.
But yeah, just take a look. I put a lot of love into my designs, and like, I like to think they're pretty good.
They're really good. I really like them. Like I said, super fangirl over here. And your links are in the show notes, and so people can actually go and click on all of those links. But do you want to say the website out loud?
polyamfam.com/shop. Or if you just go to polyamfam.com, there will be like a shop tab up top. So polyamfam.com, it'll get you there.
All right, brilliant, beautiful. Chad, thank you so much for coming on my show. Thank you for all of, yeah, you're so welcome. Thank you for all of your insight and knowledge and experience and just your energy. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. Well, for everyone who is listening or watching or however you are consuming this show right now, we love you. Thank you so much. And take on those actions, call the number and get the free giveaway, and definitely go and check out Chad's shop at polyamfam.com/shop. And we will see you next time on the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, Courageously Expanding Love.
You have been listening to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, Courageously Expanding Love, with me, Elizabeth Cunningham. Tune in live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on transformationtalkradio.com, where we shed light on relationships, sex, love, and the ways we wish we could be, but never thought were possible. Learn to love yourself and create the relationships you want. Connect with me at elizabethannCunningham.com. That's elizabethannCunningham.com.